So the 1095C form is where we're going to start. So if you,
These are the forms you'll be doing first, because this is what everybody needs to get their taxes.
The 1095C is the form that you will be giving to all of your employees that are full-time after you've done the crazy counting and mastered Obamacare for the 5th year in a row by January 31st. So similar to the W-2 reporting, and there are a lot of accountants, for example, call this their healthcare W-2 because they're also having client management problems. You're not the only ones. So if somebody refers to it as the healthcare W-2, that's fine. You know it as the 1095C. Each employee receives this if they're full-time in any month of the year or if they're full-time for the preceding look-back period. Which again, for our purposes, there are 2 look-back periods in play here, right? Because that's how our insurance year runs. This is filed with the 1094C in a big batch, February 8th in paper or April 1st electronically. This has to go from applicable large employer to all full-time employees. The government has again noted that you can't skip this just because you're worried about tax penalties. That would actually be a form of fraud. And this assumes you properly calculated full-time status for each employee. That's why we just spent 15 minutes going down that counting stuff again, because the government actually is counting on you to have done this correctly and is going to hold you accountable if the counting is not done.
Here, when it says filed regardless of any potential tax penalties, we have had bookkeepers say, okay, but I don't have to do this for the teachers, right? Because they all got insurance. No, isn't that, you're not filing these only for people for whom you might be penalized. You're filing it for everybody.
Every full-time employee.
Even if you know for sure that you're covered, you still have to create this form.
And for those of you that have done this, you know that that batch of full-time teacher forms is easy, right? It's 1A, 2C. Yeah, oh, all right, we got yes, Bobby, I remember that stuff now. All right. Provided to employees by January 31st. Again, this is just a summary. We've covered most of this already, but just the sort of the basics of the 1095. And as you know, the second you walk back into the building, somebody will be asking
getting a refund now once they're.
Okay, so we, just like the last several years, have gone section by section through this form. So if you, however you want to do it, again, we'll have all this stuff posted. So if you're taking notes independently, if you want to grab your 1095 form, that's fine. But just the basics. This is again provided to any employee who's full-time in any 1 month or during the last look-back period. So if Peter Para is a full-time paraprofessional in 9 months with the summers.
Don't have those.
Oh, you don't have those.
Oh, well, you keep talking. I'll get them.
Okay.
I was gonna say, there's a big stack.
Yeah, the 1094 is not the 1095.
Okay.
There's a big stack of them sitting on the printer, so I'll go grab them.
We'll get them for you. Yeah, so everybody here, sorry, quick footnote for those of you on DL, you should have the instructions and the 1094-95. If you don't, we'll get those for you. But we'll cover this part because it's the easy part. This is the top portion of it that all of you will remember, right? You've got the employees' demographic information, the applicable large employers' demographic information, and this, again, is where we're reviewing the who gets the form. Peter Para, remember, that's full-time in 9 months because when we're looking at individual full-time status, we're ignoring the summer, right? So Peter Para is still going to get this form. And if Connie Cook is full-time, but she quits in February, so she literally only worked for the school January of 2018, as long as Connie Cook, either for look-back purposes or in that month worked 130 hours, was full-time, Connie Cook is getting that form even though she only worked for the school for 1 month in 2018. Any full-time employee in any 1 month or for the look-back period. Danny Driver was a custodian last year, but only drives bus this year. This is a fairly common one where somebody switches hats, puts a hat on, takes a hat off. Keeping in mind that if Danny Driver was a custodian, but he stopped being a custodian in May of last year, didn't do anything in the summer, and now all he does is drive bus for us this first semester of the 18-19 school year, Danny's going to get this form because of his full-time status last school year. And again, this applicable large employer section right here has to match what you have on the 1095C. Hopefully none of you have had it happen, but if it doesn't match, if the information you fill out here doesn't match with what's on your 1094C, the government will assume you've done something wrong. We've had literally just transposed numbers on a zip code before, get the whole thing sent back. And of course, this poor bookkeeper called me in tears, thinking she'd done something horribly wrong, and all it was just not having the demographic information lined up. So if that auto-populates through Software Unlimited or Aptifund or whatever it is, great, but it should be the same. Make sure you check that before you submit.
Every so often we have you know, Dundee County Schools on one, and then Dundee County School District number 4, 5, 6, 7, 8
Yes.
on the other. That's the other place for school. So make sure you're using the same name on both.
We're not going to get into the new hire rules. They're super weird. But for those of you that are treating somebody, if you hired a new para to start this year, right? So that para first put boots on the ground in the school August 15th of 2018, and you gave that para insurance anticipating because she was going to be full-time, that para is going to get the report even though you don't have a year's worth of data on her and you use the look-back period, right? That's the main takeaway from the full-time rules for reporting purposes.
There are other ways to, I don't want to say game the system, but other ways to deal with new hires, like let them work for a while and see how many hours they get. We are finding that schools aren't really taking advantage of that, so we won't talk about it, but that's the other reason that the new hire rules can be weird.
On the same lines, if you hire a 0.5 para, right, and you made an offer to that person because the board said offer everybody their equivalent of their full-time status, that might not be an affordable offer to that para, but you, for purposes of reporting, aren't going to give her a form because you know, based on the new hire rules, that she's not going to be full-time as you guys define it. That means the new hire rules allow you to treat her for the next year as not full-time. So the decision that you made about that person's status when they started this year is really the one that's going to dictate if that new hire is going to get the form. Okay. All right, so again, we'll have more spots to stop here for questions, but now we get into
So now this is
meat
where
of
the
it.
PTSD kicks in if you fill these forms out.
We're getting into lines 14, 15, and 16, which thankfully the form looks exactly like it's looked the last 2 years. None of it is different. All the codes are the same. So none of that stuff has changed, which is awesome. All the headache about remembering, re-remembering these rules, looking at data dating back to 2016, that stuff also hasn't changed. It's just frustrating. But the nice part is this is the first, so for 2 years in a row now, we've had the same form with the same codes as the preceding year. So part 2 of the 1095C form, the one that has boxes 14, 15, and 16, that's the one that you have to fill out for all these recipients, even if you didn't offer them insurance. That's the one that gets a little bit confusing if you have somebody who is a full-time sub, because only 2 of the 10 months was that person full-time. Maybe even only 1 of the 12 months was that person full-time. But so you still have to fill out the entirety of those columns in 14, 15, and 16. Even though, or rows, excuse me, even though you know that that person you're going to have to mark differently outside of that 1 month a year. You have to fill this out whether or not you offered them insurance, as long as they were full-time in any 1 month or during the look-back period. Okay. If data is static, you use all 12 months. So the best batch of forms, your teachers, right? In the all 12-month columns, you're going to have 1A in line 14, and if they took it, 2A in line 16. If they didn't take it, line 16 is blank. Is this ringing any bells? We kind of remembering that. If you have people that have been employed the same way, gotten the same offer of insurance throughout the calendar year, they're going to be all 12-month boxes. Now, the interesting thing is, even for teachers, those premiums changed, right? The August premium is different than the September through December premium. But because their offer remains a 1A qualifying offer throughout the year, that doesn't matter for those folks. What matters is if you can use the same code in all 12 months, you just code it in the all 12-month box rather than each individual line. If the offer in line 14, the cost in line 15, or the safe harbor or whatever code you're using in line 16 changes for any of those months, you have to code that row individually. So you could have, if you have somebody who subs for you, but otherwise only works full-time on a maternity leave for 1 month, that person's line 16 code could be 2B, which is the not full-time status code, for 11 months, and then blank for 1 month when they were actually full-time. But what that means is you obviously have to code the entire row for that person when you're going through and doing the reporting.
So the vast majority of your reports are going to be just the teachers or your paras, which are going to look different halfway and halfway. It's just your oddballs that you're going to have to sit and think about how you code each month.
Again, we talked about this. We're going to repeat it many more times. The coverage year, if you like to think of it in those terms, which I think is useful to figure out all these crazy county rules, that coverage year is going to change, especially for a pair that has to pay 50% if his or her single. That's going to change from August and then September through the rest of the year. So if you have anybody who's paying any amount over the safe harbor threshold that we'll talk about, That person you know is going to change because the premiums go up, and that might be the only reason. Nothing you did in terms of changing their offer, but just the amount went up so much as 1 penny because of the increase in cost of premiums. Okay, and again, we're reporting not based on what they actually took. So if that para had the opportunity to take the $4,000 HSA plan or the full $900 deductible that you're giving your teachers right now, the fact that that para elected to take the $900 deductible plan, that is not what you're reporting. What you're reporting on is what would it have cost the para to take the cheapest single plan that you offer. And that is regardless of who else she would have enrolled and paid for. That is regardless of who else that custodian was even eligible to enroll, whether they have a full family, whether they're single, doesn't matter. What the government wants to know for the purposes of this section of the form is what would it have cost them to take the cheapest single that you offered them in all 12 of those months of 2018. So if you're a school who added the dual option this year, that's going to change, right? Because the cheapest option that they could have taken now September through December, even if they stayed on the traditional plan, your cheapest offer changed, right? So you got to keep in mind, not what did they take, what is the cheapest single they could have taken in that particular month. I think we had a question in the chat. I don't know if you want to hit it real quick or.
So if we have a teacher we hired as a 0.5 FTE teacher and the district's paying for 1/2 the cost of a single insurance policy, and the employee has elected to pay for the other half cost of the insurance, how do we determine if we made an affordable offer for coverage? When you say, well, go ahead, 0.5 FTE is where I would start.
Yeah, so if you have a 0.5 FTE teacher and your negotiated agreement says you get the pay and benefits consistent with your FTE status, right? So if you have 2 personal days, that person only gets 1. If you otherwise offer full family, that person has to pay 50% of the premium, whichever election they choose. The question for that teacher is going to be, how much would it have cost him or her to take the cheapest single that you offered? And the answer is 50% of whatever that premium would have been. So whether that's affordable or not, it matters to some extent for you, right? But if that teacher actually took the insurance, it's not going to matter. They can't penalize you because they took your insurance. They didn't go get it from healthcare.gov. So the affordability calculation is really only significant as you're sort of planning long-term. I think this was Ken's question again. What's more significant is you're going to have to put half of the premium cost in this box either way. Regardless of whether she took the insurance or he took the insurance, what would it have cost him or her to take it is what has to go in line 15. The amount you put in line 15 to some extent dictates what you're going to put in line 14. Because if it costs more than the federal rate of pay safe harbor, which we'll talk about all that in a second, if it costs more than 96 in some sense, you're going to have to actually code that teacher differently than the rest of the teachers. So whether that insurance offer was affordable doesn't really matter for reporting purposes. I don't mean to put it that way, unless you've got a state marker.
Well, to me, the predicate question is, are you doing a 1095 for this person at all?
Sure. Yeah.
They're 0.5.
True.
And so we aren't really tracking hours for substitute or for half part-time, less than full-time teachers. We don't have teachers track their hours. We've had a bunch of things come up in the last couple of years that has made me start to reconsider whether we should start making anybody that's less than, start making all teachers track their hours. But so if this person is 0.5 FTE, how do we know how many hours this person is working a month or a week for making that full-time status calculation? And it can't just be figuring out how many hours are in the classroom, right? Because we know there's some amount of outside of the class of the school day prep that happens. So to me, that's another predicate question you should be asking yourself. If this person is 0.5, do we give them a 1095C at all?
Right. If the government challenges, you're going to have some way of saying, no, they're not full-time. We know that they didn't work 130 hours in any month. So the question is really a practical one. Do you think a 0.5 teacher works 130 hours?
If this is a 0.5 librarian that has no prep, then we might not have to do a 1095C at all. Is this a 0.5 chemistry teacher that's doing flipping? Then we probably do have them working. But this is one of many reasons, again, why I'm starting to think that we should make teachers do more to track their hours.
Okay. Good question. Yeah, good. Right. I heard good luck. Yeah. Okay.
It comes up for FMLA. There's a bunch of stuff that
Yeah.
has kind of this. Yeah.
So we're going to go through line by line, 14, 15, and 16, because this is by far the bulk of what you're going to be spending your time on when you fill this stuff out. So when you're looking at line 14, this is the offer of coverage line, right? This is the one where the government wants to know what type of offer did you make them, and based on how much it might have cost them in line 15, it's going to depend on how you cover it. But unless you can use all 12 months, you have to have a code in each of those. So offer means who could enroll, not who would you pay for. Common misconception. When you say to your board, we're going to offer a full single to each person, they're thinking we are going to pay for a full single, right? But offering a full single doesn't necessarily mean you wouldn't have allowed the employee to enroll their family and paid for it. So Obamacare doesn't care for the offer of coverage. It does care how much you're willing to pay for it. But think of offer not just in terms of how much of the premiums you would have paid, but who in that individual's family they could have enrolled. So if they're a single person, it's easy. If they're married, or if they're married with dependents, the government is interested in who could have enrolled based on that offer of insurance. Very common question that I get. Bobby, we offer our paras half a single. This para said, I want to, my husband farms, and I want to buy full family insurance. I'll pay for it out of pocket. Your answer to that under Obamacare every time should be, yes, no problem, go for it. If you're saying no, you can't do anything other than enroll in the single insurance, let's look at changing that because it is possible then you have not actually made an offer of coverage to that person's spouse and dependents. Part of the making an affordable qualifying offer is offering to that person's spouse and dependents, even if they have to pay for it. Affordability is based on the single. The offer has to capture who all could enroll in addition to how much of the premiums they would have had to pay.
And I've had this conversation a lot. What do you offer your classified staff? We offer half a single. But could they enroll their family? Oh God, why would they do that? It's gonna cost them like more money to pay the premium than they're gonna make in a whole month. No, I'm not asking you if it's a financially wise decision. I'm asking you if she shows up with her checkbook and says, I want to buy it, will you let her? And every time I ask it like that, the bookkeeper says, oh, well, yes.
I suppose so. Why would anybody do it, right?
So but that's what offer means. Would you let her buy it from you if she said, I want to insure my husband and kids?
Yep. I know I'm coming out of pocket for the other half of the single and the balance of the family, right? I know that it's going to cost me $16,000, $17,000. I know that.
More than I make,
Right.
That's why I keep saying you've got to uncouple offer from pay for in your brain.
And appropriately, a lot of business officials and administrators have said, we're not wanting to hound that person for a check every month for the rest of the premium that isn't covered by the wages. Totally get that. Obamacare could not care less about your inefficiencies that are created by your staff members who depend on you for virtually everything, including financial advice.
But
right?
if you say, yes, we will let you buy insurance for your family, we need the entire check up front on January 1st. You have made an offer of insurance that they could purchase from you. So, I mean, you can make it so it's not fiscally feasible and still have it be an offer of insurance.
And when we get into the offer codes, that'll make a little bit more sense here. But again, offering to the dependents and to their spouse could mean very well that they have to come out of pocket for that. The question is, could they have enrolled them? So district offers full family to Tomcat teacher. They only offer full single to Connie Cook. Tomcat has no family. Connie has a spouse and kids. The question in this case is, both Connie and Tom, could they enroll their spouse or kids if they had them? So even though what we said to Connie is full single, the question is, if Connie said, fine, now I want to enroll my spouse and kids, would you allow her to? Right, that's the key. Keep the offer separate from what the board would pay for. And okay, so that's that part of it. So on to the coding. This is everybody's favorite code. And I want to make sure we don't run out of time here before we get through all this stuff. The 1A qualifying offer. This is the one that if you can use it, you absolutely want to use it. It says that number one, your plan, so if you go through and if you actually look at the instructions for filling out 1095C, we've got some of this extraneous stuff in here that EHA takes care of for you, only because that's a little bit easier to match up with the instructions in there. It says you have to offer minimum essential coverage and minimum value to that person.
Good news, don't have to worry about it.
Yep, EHA plan, check, not worried about that. You must also have offered to their spouse and dependents, not been willing to pay for it, must have offered. So if you've never had the question, what is your answer going to be? Could they have enrolled their spouse and dependents? Yes, absolutely.
Yes,
even though I would have thought that was really stupid and I probably would not have done it, they totally could have, right? The cheapest single plan offered cannot have cost them more than 9.56% of their mainland single federal poverty line number. Remember, this is the one where the IRS has said, if it's less than this amount, we don't care. The number for the 2018 reporting year is $96.71. That is the mainland federal poverty line number for 2018 times 9.56% divided by 12. So a teacher that you offer the full family has to pay how much every month for their premiums? 0. That is less than $96.71. If you said to all of your staff, congratulations everybody, for 2018 you have to pay $96.70 every month. Guess what you have to put in line 15? Nothing, because you're putting 1A in line 14. If you are looking at your line 15 number, which is the amount they would have had to pay for the cheapest single, and it is less than this amount, you need to take it out and put 1A in line 14. The question is, in every one of those months, they had to pay something. So your teachers, it's easy. This is why all of them are a 1A offer if you offer full family, right? The monthly amount, if it is less than $96.71 that person had to pay, you should be using the 1A code in line 14. Either for all 12 months if that's true, or for any month in which it is true.
So for our district, the cheapest option we offer to our careers is you have to pay $55 of your premium.
Love it. If you have to pay $55 of your premium, guess what you've given them? A qualifying offer.
1A offer, yep.
So as we'll see when we get into the line 15, if you use 1A in line 14, you don't have to put anything in line 15. Even though it's objectively true they have to pay $55. If the government says, basically, we're not going to mess with anybody.
Yeah.
We don't want to pay our little minions in the back office figuring out penalties. We don't want to bother them with people that require less than this amount because frankly, you're going to need a safe harbor anyway, right? So what they've said is if in any of those months, what they had to pay is less than $96.71, you should put 1A and you don't have to fill anything in line 15 for those months. So if you can use 1A, use it.
Awesome.
This is the 1A that goes for most of anybody that gets at least a full single offer will be 1A. 1B is probably not going to be used very much. This is if you offer minimum essential coverage and minimum value to only the employee. If somebody has come to you and said, I would like to enroll my family, and you have said no, the technically correct reporting answer is that would be a 1B and not a 1A offer. If you only offered minimum essential coverage and minimum value to the employee.
Yeah, so I just got this question. What if we've never had anyone ask? The answer is, then you are offering family coverage.
Absolutely. You can sign a blood oath that if anybody comes to your office and says, I'll pay out of pocket for the full freight, yep, totally, makes sense to me. So again.
And again, it's not whether or not they could do it right now, because it's the same person that asked about qualifying.
Yes.
It's not if they could, like if the open enrollment period is closed, if they had come to you during open enrollment, I guess that's the more relevant question. If they could have come to you during open enrollment, would you have said?
Right.
No. So.
So 1C, again.
Someday I would love to see these forms. Who fills this out? What employer offers insurance to employee and kids, but not to spouse? That's just weird. Anyway, keep going.
Apparently enough to have a code.
Honeywell in Nebraska City. Well, there you go. See?
Well, and there are a lot of what we call conditional offers, which we'll get to in a second, right? You can enroll your spouse as long as they don't have a coverage option at their current employer. So that sort of stuff, I'm assuming that's in part why this is. But again, 1B is if you've ever said no to that question. If you've done that, call me and let's talk about it.
Yeah.
Before you report that, let's make sure that that's actually what happened.
Because I'm not 100% yeah.
Let's make sure that's actually what the board
EHA
wanted.
would always have let them in.
Yes, of course they would have. And your board probably would have, right? So to the extent that you as the bookkeeper or business official made if you said no, we're going to take the position that you lack authority.
Or what you probably said is, oh, honey, you don't want to do that because it's going to cost you more. I don't think that's actually saying no. That's just giving good, friendly advice.
So we're lawyering a little bit up here, as you can tell. There is some legal advice component to this, but the fact of the matter is 1B, 1C, 1D probably should not end up on any of your forms, at least not without thinking through whether that is the reality of what you offer.
Okay, we've got the 0.5 teacher again, offered half the cost of a single policy because the negotiated agreement elects to purchase the other half. Do we have to ensure that the cost she bears for paying the other half? No, you do not.
Good. Ken's always always got the best questions. Okay, so 1E, this is one to circle and highlight on your form. This is one that you probably will use fairly often. This is the one that says, we offered EHA plan that met minimum essential coverage and minimum value to the spouse and to the dependents and to the employee, but we can't use the 1A qualifying offer, right? 1E is the one that says we offered to everybody, but it would have cost them more than the $96.71 to enroll. So if you're a school who said, paras, you can sign up for insurance, but rather than $55, you have to pay $100, those paras are going to be coded with 1E and $100 in line 15 because you can't use the 1A code for them. So 1E is the code that is the same type of offer, but you didn't meet the affordability threshold for the qualifying offer code of 1A. So the para that has to pay half of the single, the para that has to pay the entire single, right? They're going to have gotten a 1E offer because we did offer to everybody in the family to be able to enroll in an EHA plan. It's just that they were going to have to pay more than $96.71.
For the employee.
Yes, for the cheapest single the employee could have taken. Okay. So district pays full single to Peter Para and allows him to enroll his spouse and dependents at his own cost. This is still a 1A qualifying offer. Because even though Peter Para is writing a $1,300 check every month to pick up the balance of what that insurance costs, Peter Para's cheapest single offer that we made to him would still be a qualifying offer. Just because somebody's writing you a check doesn't necessarily mean that you haven't made a qualifying offer. Just because you're payroll deducting doesn't necessarily mean that it wasn't a qualifying offer. Because as Karen pointed out, we have to keep reminding ourselves too, the cheapest single is what you're basing all these determinations on. So if you said to Peter Para, we'll give you a single, but you got to pay the full freight for your family, that's still a qualifying offer because his amount toward the cheapest single is $0. Example 2, the district requires Peter Para to pay half of his single premium, which we just ran this. I don't know that that's even reflective of EHA's cost, and allows him to enroll his spouse and dependents at his own cost. That means if this is what you had to put in line 15 for Peter Para, no longer can you say that it's a 1A qualifying offer. So for Peter Para, in line 14 will be 1E, and then this amount, because that's what his monthly cost would have been if he enrolled in the cheapest single that you offered.
Hold on, I want to go back and make sure I read Ken's question here. Right, because I think actually, do we have to ensure that the cost she bears repay the other half of the cost does not exceed 9.5? We don't worry about household income. I think this teacher would probably be coded as 1E if what she's paying to pick up her other half is more than 97.
If you've got a 0.5 teacher who's paying half of whichever premium EHA offers, that's going to be more than $96.71.
Yeah.
So that teacher is going to be a 1E offer with the amount in there. But that's a separate question, Ken, from whether you're ever going to pay a penalty.
Right.
Because whether you're going to pay a penalty is based on then when the IRS looks at those lines and matches them up with that teacher's household. And what if that teacher is married to, I don't know, somebody who wins the lottery, right? Their household income is going to be so high that it's not going to matter. That's why you cannot know on this form whether you're going to have to pay a penalty if you put 1E and something in line 15, right? If you put 1A, you know you're not going to have to pay a penalty. But if you put 1E and that number is say $250 a month, you're gonna have to wait until the IRS's little minions do their count.
So next question, I don't think I fully understand the difference between 1A and 1E. 1A is if you are either paying the entire premium or what they have to pay is less than $96.71 per month, then that's a 1A offer. 1E is they take insurance, but they pay more than $96.71 per month for the single. Right, for the single, that's exactly right. So I hope that helps.
We'll hit on that again too, and when we get to the forms at the end that we filled out, we'll hit on that a bit more. Okay, so 1F, again, not going to apply. 1G, not going to apply unless you're a self-insured plan, at which point you're probably not using the C form, but we won't get into that. This applies to self-insured who's not fully insured plans, and again, we're not going to worry about those. So cross those out, not going to be a problem if you are on EHA. 1H is another code that you're going to use fairly often. So in your repertoire of line 14 codes, I think the only ones you're really probably going to have to worry about are 1A, 1E, and 1H. 1H is no offer of coverage. That could be for a million reasons, not least of which is they weren't yet employed until August of 2018. It could be because this is the sub that we're only giving her a 1095C form because she did a full-time sub. So we never offered her insurance or him insurance. 1H is we did not offer insurance. That does not mean you're going to pay a penalty. All it means is the truth of the matter is we never offered that person the ability to enroll in any plan that the district offers.
Again, remember that these forms are used for multiple purposes by the IRS, not just figuring out what penalties you owe. So 1H does not mean you owe a penalty. It could mean that this person wants a 1H code so that they can get subsidized insurance from the exchange, for example. So it does, I see a lot of superintendents especially fussing that if they didn't offer that they're gonna have to pay $1 million penalty, and that's just not how it works.
Yeah. Again, so this applies if you didn't offer, includes months where the recipient wasn't an employee, and that's also what you're going to use for COBRA coverage. So if somebody ends up taking your COBRA coverage, you didn't actually make them an offer. It was really the third party through COBRA. But so the government said, I can see where COBRA is confusing, so they made very specifically clear that anybody who takes COBRA coverage actually gets 1H rather than any other code.
Kelly, what do you look confused?
I'm sure that I know who takes COBRA.
Right.
Yeah, you may not.
You might, yeah, you might not.
Because EHA does that. We got a third party plan administrator through EHA, so you may not even know.
Okay. No more transition relief. We got rid of that a while ago. So for any of your superintendents, like, aren't we still in transition relief? No. Okay, 1J, again, this is the conditional offer stuff. We're not going to get into this, but basically, if you've ever said to your staff, you are only allowed to enroll your spouse and dependents if they didn't have an offer someplace else. That is what it would be called a conditional offer, which is different than not offering them. It's saying, yeah, you can take our insurance, but there's this thing you have to prove before we would give it to you. So if you've ever said to anybody, you may have a conditional offer, but again, I would want to make sure that the answer wasn't, oh, sure, but if you want to pay out of pocket, we'll allow you to, right? So there are some schools who have said, or some employers who have said, we will in fact pay for your full family, as long as you can demonstrate that they got no offer of insurance at the spouse's employer. So the school would have paid for it, but you had to meet this condition, right? So if you've ever made a conditional offer, just think through that. I hope you haven't, but let's make sure it's true that that offer was conditional, even if they would have had to pay for it.
There are two circumstances where I see this come up where schools care. One is lots of schools have set up dealios where if Bobby teaches in Seward and Chrissy teaches in Milford, Seward and Milford have a deal where they agree that they're going to split the cost of that full family, right? That's not technically a conditional offer. That's just agreements on the back end between the two schools about how you're going to split the cost. So I don't want you to think that, no, we have a deal where Milford sends us a check for half of Bobby's insurance every month. That's not really a conditional offer.
Because Bobby and Chrissy's, our 1095 is actually going to be look the same, except for only one of us will enroll in the insurance, right? We both got a qualifying offer. It's just that one of us took it, and then our bosses figured it out on the back end how to arrange for that insurance.
So that happens in schools, not uncommonly. And then the other reason that this comes up is somebody comes to you and says, I want you to say that you wouldn't give me insurance because then my husband will get full insurance from the co-op. And the problem is if you say that, then there's potential, like it's not an accurate report. So even if they don't want it, if you have offered to pay part of their single, that's how you report it. But so the co-op is trying to figure out, they don't want to carry anybody on their plan that could get insurance from someplace else.
And there are many parents who came in and said, please don't offer me a full single because then I can't get any subsidies on the exchange.
We have lots of that.
That's objectively true, right? They ended up paying a lot more because you offered them a full single than if you would have offered to pay none of the premiums.
What was so interesting is we saw boards really agonize over wanting to offer the most possible insurance coverage that they could and be reasonably fiscally prudent. And then a lot of those boards then got yelled at by their staff because what they would have rather just have nothing offered. So,
Okay, so
well,
that's all the line 14, what?
if we have an employee that, or you want to wait?
Well, let's do this one and then we're gonna have to wait or we're never gonna get through all this.
We have an employee that rolls in insurance, then quits in November, but takes COBRA for December and is not employed. Do I put 1H in December?
Yes,
And not employed 2A on line 16?
yes.
Yes, you got it.
Okay, on to line 15 here. So again, remember, a couple of things here. You only put something in line 15 if you use these codes. B, C, D, you probably are not using, right? So really, 1E is probably the only reason if you put 1E in line 14 that you're gonna fill out line 15. Because if you put 1A, you don't have to fill out line 15. Truly, this is line 15 is only there for anybody that's asked to pay more than $96.71 in any month, right? If you put 1A, that $55 that the paras have to pay, that's never going to show up anywhere to the federal government because you're going to put 1A in line 14 and line 15 is going to be blank. Yeah, so I don't know why we have this in here. This doesn't really apply for schools, but the government makes clear that if you use one of these weird codes, this is the conditional offer thing. If you've made a conditional offer, give one of us a call. If it's the same in all 12 months, put it over here in the all 12 month box. But if it's different, then you're going to have to code it, which for any of these people that have to pay, say 10% or 20% or 50% of the premium, it could be that obviously you're going to make that switch between August and September when EHA premiums increase. But again, line 15 is not based on what they picked. Line 15 is based on what it would have cost them to take the cheapest single plan that you offer. So if we have not beaten that horse dead yet, we're going to try. Regardless of whether they enroll and regardless of family size, right? So somebody that turns down your offer of coverage, you're still reporting what it would have cost them to take the cheapest single. And again, just to reiterate this point, this covers 2 plan years. So that's 2 data set counting years for the look back period. That's 2 premium cost years. And so for a lot of these folks, you're going to have to code the entirety of the line, and line 15 you won't be able to use all 12 months. So the good news, which remains good news from last year, they made this change. You are allowed to annualize the amount that an employee pays. So for example, if you said to all of your parents, for 9 months, you have to pay $120, or you have to pay $100, right? But then in June, July, and August, you don't have to pay anything because they're not getting a paycheck, and it's easier than having them write a check to you, right? Whether you told them they have to pay $100 or whether you told them they have to pay half the single, if you collect it over 9 months, you can report it over 12. Why that's significant is if you said to them, you only have to pay $100 in those 9 months, when you divide that by 12, you're actually now going to meet the qualifying offer mark. So if you say to your parents, if you want to take insurance and you got to pay half the single, but we're going to collect that in the 9 or 10 months you get a paycheck, you can report that by dividing by 12. The total amount they had to pay divided by 12.
That's really good news because
This helps with
more schools do this than we really realized before Obamacare kicked in.
With the 2 plan years, that also makes it easier, right? So you can add the total amount that they had to pay in each of those months and divide that by 12. Everybody with me on that? Okay. And again, if you do that and they dip below 96.71, change the whole thing. We're going back to 1A. All right.
Good news, you did all that work. And
cash in lieu, we are going to try to do super quickly. If your negotiated agreement has cash in lieu and you don't have any provision in there dealing with the Obamacare implications, you're late. Not too late, but you're late. If you offer cash in lieu, the federal government says that unless you stand on your right foot, close your left eye, and sing it just the right pitch, that may hurt you for Obamacare reporting purposes. This is not the first year we've talked about this. I think it's the 3rd year in a row. The rules, though, have stayed the same from last year, which is that if you have what they call an opt-out arrangement, that's a fancy term for cash in lieu or a flex plan that they can cash out. If you have an opt-out arrangement, that counts as the cost of insurance if you don't do it the right way, because that is cash somebody has to give up to take the insurance. So we're not going to go into great detail, but understand that if the employee's choice is take full family or get $1,000 a month, and you haven't structured it the right way, that employee's cost is going to be $1,000 a month. That's the significant, even if they took the insurance, right?
Because they had to give up $1,000 a month to get the insurance.
Right. So the government,
and we preach this to you guys, and you remember it, but you aren't the ones that are negotiating at the bargaining table when the teachers union is counting on your board that they want cash in lieu. So this is your job to go back and remind your board members, cash in lieu is not cost free for teachers. Even if what you're giving them as cash is less than what the premium would be. You've got to do it the right way.
Right, so by way of example, if the premium costs the employee $90 a month, right, that would be a 1A offer if all they had to pay was $90 a month. But you said to that classified staff member, if you turn down our insurance, we'll give you $50 a month, cold hard cash, no questions asked. That para's cost that has to go in line 15 is actually $140 because you didn't structure that cash out payment the right way. Now, we'll talk about what you have to do. It's not hard
Not that hard,
to
but-
set this up in a way that isn't going to penalize you. But if this is all foreign to you and you have cash in lieu, call your lawyer yesterday and let's get this squared away. Because it's going to take a change to your negotiated agreement and how you process those cash in lieu payments. So if you have cash in lieu and you're doing it the right way, you will have what is called an eligible opt-out arrangement. So if you have one of these opt-out arrangements, again, it's cash in lieu. This doesn't include employer contributions towards cafeteria plans, depending on how you have it set up. But for the most part, we're talking about those schools that have traditional, as we call it, cash in lieu or a cash out option in their flex plan. And again, unless you have an eligible opt-out arrangement, unless you've done the right thing in the eyes of the government, you're going to have to report that cash amount in addition to any premium amount in line 15. Okay, so how do you make it eligible? The employee provides you with reasonable evidence. So for a lot of schools, that's been, bring me proof of your other coverage before I give you the cash, right? Very common scenario. That the employee's tax family was eligible to enroll in minimum essential coverage. So we've got, number one, not just was the employee covered. So when you say to the employee, bring me your proof of outside coverage, it can't just be a certification that I, the employee of the school, am covered. It's also got to include that offer, probably from the spouse's employer, maybe from the military, right? That allowed your employee to enroll their entire tax family, spouse and dependents on that outside plan. That the coverage is not from healthcare.gov, right? That's the government doesn't want
They don't want the employee to take your money to buy
government insurance. And here's the key: reasonable evidence, this stuff that they have to provide you, can be included in a form that they sign, which says, I've done this the right way.
And they don't have, and they can, you don't have to understand what tax family means, they just have to sign on the freaking line,
You
right?
cannot know they're lying. That's the important part. She's right unless you know that they're lying or you know that they're wrong, which is why it hurts you to know your staff as well as you do. You know for sure that Jane Doe or John Doe Parrott doesn't have a clue what tax family means. They're going to sign that thing because they want their cash. If you know that the co-op where their spouse is employed only offers a single, and they sign this form, you're not supposed to give them their cash because they can't actually attest to those things in it, right? So yes, they can just sign it, but if you know that they're signing something that isn't true, it's a bit of an ethical dilemma that you're going to have to think through. What the government would tell you is you should not give them the cash, otherwise it's going to count against you.
We don't see cash and lieu options really going to classified staff
Right.
very much. We see cash and lieu options going to teachers.
But part of this is, now that the individual market, now
That's
that
true.
the individual mandate is going away, it could be that outside coverage availability is.
We should be more careful. The individual mandate still exists.
Yes.
The tax penalty, as part of the individual mandate, is what's gone away.
Yes. That's true.
Yes.
Move to strike, what I said. Here's the long and short of it. If you offer cash in lieu, have an attestation form.
Yep.
If you offer cash in lieu, have an attestation form. That way, if the government comes in and your negotiated agreement doesn't have the right wording in it, at least we've got something we can point to.
Yes.
Before you pay another dollar in cash, if you do that monthly or if you do that on the aggregate, make sure that each employee that gets the cash signs this form. That's the long and short of cash.
That's right. So
We can talk through practically what that means for your cash offer, but if they can't sign that form, you shouldn't give them the money. Or you're going to have to report it on line 15. Okay. Again, you have to get this. Ideally, you would get this probably around open enrollment time. So get this attestation signed in August, because it has to be done, the regulations say, which is, again, your federal government at work, within a few months prior to the start of the plan. Okay. Again, you should include this in your negotiated agreements, your cafeteria plans. If you're required to report it, it's more than $96.71 a month. You might lose your 1A offer. Line 15 is not required, remember, if you use 1A or 1H. Only probably if you're using line E or 1E. Okay, line 16. This one's pretty easy. We're hopefully going to get it done in just a couple of minutes, unless you've got something.
I've got questions, so no, I'm just.
Okay.
Those of you that are texting and chatting, I see you. We'll get you.
Yeah. Generally, this is where you have to justify not paying your tax penalty. This is where you'll indicate if somebody enrolled in the insurance, if there's a safe harbor that you can use. And in a lot of cases, here's the important thing. Don't freak out if you're like, well, nothing goes in line 16. For those who have done the reporting before, you will remember that a teacher that gets your 1A qualifying offer that doesn't take the insurance is blank in line 16. It is not bad that there isn't a code in line 16, right? It probably just means, especially if you use code 1A, that they didn't take the insurance. That's really all that it signals to the government. And again, you must use only one code per month unless you can use all 12. There's a hierarchy when more than one code applies. So for example, somebody who is less than full-time but also took your insurance, the government's more interested that they took your insurance and they weren't full-time, even though both codes could apply. So no more transition relief. 2A, they weren't employed. So somebody that you hired in February, in January, they're going to be 1H, line 15 blank, and 2A, because they were not employed by the school in January. They didn't work any hours. 2B is they were not full-time during the month, and they did not enroll in the insurance even if they were offered, even if we offered and they were eligible to do so. Most important part of 2B is signaling that substitute teacher who, other than that 1 month a year for the maternity leave, that person was probably a 2B employee if they subbed a couple of days a week. That means, yeah, we employed them. Yeah, they worked some hours, but they weren't full-time. 2C is the employee enrolled in coverage each day of that month. This is the one that you're going to use most often for anybody that takes your coverage. And again, for COBRA, they don't want you to put 2C if you know the employee's on COBRA. I'm not sure how you would, but if you happen to know that, they want you to code COBRA as though the employee doesn't work for you.
It does not matter what you put in line 15 for how much they had to pay if you put 2C in line 16. If they took your insurance, they cannot subject you to a penalty.
Right, so Ken, that's really the answer to your question.
That was exactly what I was just going to say.
If somebody takes your insurance, even if they had to pay the full amount, right? If they take your insurance, put 2C in line 16.
And go whistling all the way to the bank.
Don't, and you can stop worrying about it. Okay. 2D, we're going to use this one in a few limited circumstances, primarily during the enrollment wait period. 2D is often used, for example, during August. If you're somebody who waits until September 1 to have new teachers take insurance versus the first day of employment. I understand EHA allows you to do either. I think most schools have that person start September 1. So in August, it's true that that teacher worked for you, probably was full-time if you count 230 hours. But the reason that that person didn't get insurance is because they were simply in the EHA enrollment wait period. Everybody with me? Okay. Again, using for things like new hires, use in August for new employees ahead of 2B. So if you've got a para that doesn't start until the 20th of August, you're still going to use 2B, even though you could have used 2B to say to the government that that person wasn't actually full-time. The government wants this signals to them that you made the person an offer, they're just in that enrollment wait period. So that can be up to 90 days. EHA is typically only 30 or 31 at most, but that's what that one does. 2E, you're not going to have to worry about that. Then we've got the safe harbors. And I'm not going to go through these. I don't think we need to go through these in great detail. If you are reporting in line 15, that means that that person for that month has to pay more than $96.71 toward the cost of the cheapest single that they could have taken. It is possible that you can say to the government, even though that person had to pay $118 this month, that may meet one of the safe harbors, which will then stop the government from looking at whether that person could subject you to penalty. There are 3 of them. Unless you have 1E in line 14, a dollar amount in line 15, this is not going to matter, right? You're only going to have to worry about these to the extent that you have put 1E in line 14, some dollar amount in line 15, and you can say that when you compare the amount they had to pay to their W-2, when you look at the federal poverty line safe harbor and take 9.56% of it,
Look here, that's functionally useless because of the 1A code.
Right.
That's where people get confused.
this is the big one. And we're not going to go into specific details. If you have questions, call one of us, call your school's lawyer. The rate of pay safe harbor is usually the best bang for your buck. That is 130, because that's the full-time hours, times their hourly rate. If you don't ask them to pay more than 9.56% of that math, you can put that safe harbor in. So again, there's a number. You'll know that it's not worth looking at the safe harbors, depending on what the bottom line dollar is for your line 15 coding for that employee. It could be that it's worthless to run this math, because if they have to pay 250 bucks, right, that's probably going to be way outside of the application of a safe harbor. And in that case, if they didn't take the insurance, it's probably just blank, right? 2I, nothing. If no code applies, leave it blank. Again, some months may have a code and some months may not. That's entirely common. If you have a teacher who starts in August, gets insurance in September, but doesn't take it, September through December in line 16 are going to be blank, but you're going to have something from January through August, right? So that's totally common if line 16 looks all sorts of funky. A teacher or other full-time employee who doesn't take insurance is 1A blank blank. So if you have a whole bunch of those for anybody that doesn't take your plan, but you gave a qualifying offer, totally common. You do not have to fill out part 3. You haven't. This is only here if you're a self-insured employer, basically, but you don't have to fill that out. This is what Blue Cross reports to them.
Okay, so
We've done
we
it.
have lots of questions.
If you're here and you need to stand up and mill about, feel free. But
So, question, I had a full-time employee die while still under contract. How do I fill out her 1095C?
the month the employee died, you probably had paid for insurance, right? So I would code that month if the employee was on insurance. Let's assume it's a teacher. Every month up to that month is probably 1A if you gave them a full family offer, and 2C if they enrolled, right? After that point, it's probably going to be 1H, because even if their family took COBRA, right, we still code it as 1H, blank in line 15, and probably 2A in line 16, because that person does not work for you because they're deceased.
Should you have the employee taking cash in lieu fill out an opt-out form each year, or
Yes.
only when they make the coverage or non-coverage election?
Each year, has to be annual.
Does Blue Cross Blue Shield enrollment form declines coverage?
No,
No, you need an attestation
Nope.
form, yeah.
because the Blue Cross form doesn't, unless they've changed it, it doesn't say, and I could enroll my entire tax
It doesn't
family on that
include
other
tax
plan.
family, yeah. Does cash in lieu for early retirement that's placed in a 403B to pay for insurance premiums, would you report it since the employee is still employed when the money is deposited?
So this is they're not a common law employee anymore once they've resigned from your employment.
Well, now, but so,
I believe Blue Cross Blue Shield is reporting for that person.
does the cash in lieu for early retirement that's placed in a 403B,
That is,
since the employee is still employed when the money is deposited, that's the part that I'm high centering on. So you're funding the 403B like in May when they announce their early retirement?
presumably.
I don't think that's gonna make any difference.
I don't think it is either. Because that employee, that is not an opt-out arrangement.
Right. They're not opting out, they're
Right.
taking the
They're
insurance.
taking more. They probably took your insurance and are now are taking a bunch more for you to
Yeah.
get their resignation.
Yeah.
So I don't think that's actually an opt-out arrangement.
We need to take a
Let's take
necessary
5.
break. 5-minute break, we'll be back in 5 minutes.
11:12.
I've gotten 2 like breaking news emails from various things.
Obamacare
related. If they decline the insurance to take, like, Blue Cross Blue Shield has the form, right? You also need to make them do that attestation for you if you have cash.
Oh, if I don't have cash.
You don't have cash in lieu,
You don't have to worry.
Right, okay.
I'll have to go back and watch that segment that I walked out on. I started coughing on that, and I don't want those people to have to listen to me.
Still rolling here.
It's still-
Bobby, so those people now that, you know, are like parents, that are eligible, so now all that's,
Yeah.
like you said, is paid for the
Mhm.
I don't have to worry about that.
You pay for the full single.
They pay for the full
Obamacare if they're writing you $12,000 in checks. Doesn't matter. They're the cheapest single that you offer them. Pay for, so their cost is zero. Yeah, that's easy. That's whether that was what you and the board intended or not. That makes reporting
No, I
super
think
easy.
that's what you had advised.
So if they pay a fee, so they have $100 a month, that's divided.
So let's say that you say to them,
We pay the employee,
yes,
but they pay a fee for that.
you do payroll deduct for their premium costs. Is that what you're saying?
Right. So that if they're less than that,
96
671 over a 12-month period.
Yes.
So they get 120 each month for the 10 months.
So we can do that math. What is that? 14. What is it divided by 12?
The
So
12
they pay $120.
Right, for 10 months. Right.
You all can probably do this in your head.
So it's 12 on.
But they pay that over 9 months? How many months do you
Oh, let me,
see what I'm saying?
yeah, let me.
So if they do
I got
100,
myself all confused now.
if they do 120 over 9 months, that's going to be $1,080. But you get to divide that over 12, which puts you below the 96. So now those are all 1A offers.
So it's the total amount over.
The total
months
amount-
that I deducted divided by 12.
Let's put it another
So I
way.
need to
It's the total amount you deduct for all the calendar months of
Oh, we
20.
don't.
So if that's 9 months at 120 per, that's fine. If that's 12 months at 120 per, that's fine. But really, you get to divide whatever amount you collect by 12.
So if I do it for 10 months, I'm over.
Yeah. Well, yes, because you're going to be at $100, right? Yeah.
So what amount, so what I put in, so the 120 and I would deduct in that.
I would. So it's not going to matter. You could either put $100 in all 12 months, or you could put 120 in the 9 months and 0 in the others.
Oh, okay.
So-
So if you go over 20, over 12 months or just, okay.
I would probably do 120 in the 9 months.
What I actually do.
What you actually do, because then at least in those 3 months, then even if they subject you to penalty, you wouldn't pay for those months.
Okay.
But they probably wouldn't. They may be eligible for a safe harbor, right? If you pay that para 13 or 14,000, take 9.56 times that, that's over $100. You probably meet the W-2 or at least the rate of pay safe harbor too. Okay. That's worth looking into if you're that low in line 15.
I have a quick question. We have dual enrollment for our city. By the way, I'm supposed to tell you how come you're not responding to Jeff.
I thought he was in the hospital.
In North Dakota.
Yeah,
I know.
a shelf in my head. It's like elf on a shelf.
We're going to get rolling again for those of you out there, just so we make sure
So
everybody.
we're answering questions, so we're gonna take
Yep.
a question right now. So
Okay, so we have dual enrollment, so we contribute to employees' HSA for the premium difference. Does that have to be reported anywhere on any of this?
The question is not what happened. The question is how much would the employee have to pay toward the cost of the cheapest single that you offered them. So I would take the position, if you take the high deductible plan, because Blue Cross is telling everybody that you have to put the difference into an HSA. That's just
you don't have.
patently false, but Blue Cross is doing that because they want your money. And I don't care if somebody from Blue Cross is listening, you should stop lying to these people. They're telling you that you have to put that into the HSA, you don't. So the question is going to be, if that's part of your negotiated agreement, I think, there is the argument that we can count that toward contribution of the cost. But if you're already paying the full single plus dumping some into the HSA, that's a 1A offer. So it's not going to matter. Correct. I wanted to more hit on the point of you have to put the difference into the HSA. That is not legally required. It's no longer a dual option then. What's the district savings if you have to pay the same amount? It's stupid. Okay.
Well. Okay, we offer 403B annuity if the employee doesn't take the insurance. It's for both teachers and classified staff. How is that reported? It doesn't matter where the money goes. Do you have the employees sign the attestation
Correct.
form before you dump that money into the 403B? If they sign the attestation form, then that money doesn't count against you, so to
Correct.
speak. But if you don't have them sign the attestation form, then that money is going to count in line, whatever it is, 15 for what you are making them pay.
If you give them money wherever it goes, if they turn down your insurance, that's an opt-out arrangement. Whether it goes into a 403B, a flex plan, an HSA, or their pocket, doesn't matter.
They should sign the attestation form.
If they don't sign the attestation form, you cannot give them the money. That's what the government would tell you.
And is that for teachers also, or just?
Every employee.
Everybody,
Yep.
everybody. We talk a lot about teachers versus classified paras versus bus drivers. The feds just see employees. So they don't care who it is that gets the cash. They don't care that there's a negotiated agreement, is basically what I'm saying. Okay, so somebody else asked us.
Hold on, I want to add one thing. If your teachers say, I'm not signing that, that's not in the agreement, call us, because then I will call the union lawyer and complain. They know these rules.
They know.
We will take the position that through collective bargaining, we can't violate the law. Their union lawyers know that we can functionally force that requirement on them anyway, because that is a condition of taking our benefit. So it doesn't actually help them that it's not in the agreement. You tell those teachers, either you sign this or we'll have to get our lawyers involved, and if that works, great. But if not, we will.
And truth be told, the union just soon force everybody to take the insurance anyway.
Exactly.
So they'd be perfectly happy to kill your
Yep.
cash option.
Because they get a cut of the EHA. So
So if they do the attestation form, do we still need to get proof of their other coverage? That is your proof of their other coverage.
you can do both and.
If you think they're lying,
Correct.
but
That's
other
exactly
than that, you don't have to. Chat, we have a 0.75 FTE para, work less than 130 hours per month, but they do enroll in insurance and pay more than the allowable amount. Do we need to even report them because they're not full-time?
Nope.
Good news, yep. Allowed to enroll in insurance but pay 25% of the cheapest single. That's very generous, but you don't get any credit for that from the feds because you don't.
The reason that the first hour was everybody wanting a lobotomy is that counting is the first step. You will have a list of those folks to whom you owe the 1095C first and foremost, right? This person's not on that list.
So if you don't have this form now, can I get it from them in the middle of the year?
If you don't have the attestation form now,
Better now than not.
better now than never, and I would post-date it. I would have them swear to you that this was also true in August.
Yeah.
If they can't do that, and you're dribbling the cash or opt-out arrangement out over the course of the year, your choices are to stop and potentially violate your negotiated agreement, or keep paying it and report it differently on the 1095C for this year. Then change it for next year.
Yeah, because I don't think you can recapture the payments. That's what I was just sitting here thinking, because,
The NSA is going to say, we don't care that you botched this. Appropriately so.
well, this is both paras and
Oh,
teachers.
right.
So paras, you might be able to claw that back. That's what I was sitting here thinking.
If you want to be mischievous, call Karen. If you want to not upset your staff, call
If
Bob.
they won't sign it, give one of us a call.
Yeah.